Is it recording? Yes, it is. Okay, so I don't have much memory left on my phone, but I just feel like constantly making tweets and Instagram stories is not going to sufficiently cover how I feel about the Dominic Cummings situation. So I'm going to sort of briefly, hopefully, maybe not, explain my view here. So obviously Dominic Cummings has made a trip to a cottage on his parents' estate during the height of the lockdown. He released a statement on Monday the 25th, which was yesterday at the time of recording, that was meant to clear things up. I'll cut to the chase. Do I believe that he broke the lockdown rules? Yes, I do. It was a minor breach of the rules if you consider the context, if you completely believe his story, that is, but it was a breach of the rules. The thing that seems particularly iffy to me is this Barnard Castle trip, and that's the iffy part to a lot of people as well. Do I think he should resign? I don't know. Because the reason why I don't know is sort of because it's factored by two things. First of all, what do I think would be the greater good for the government? But also, what would be the response in the public? I don't know if Dominic Cummings going would create a better public mood or not. Maybe it would. It probably would, actually, thinking about it. But I'm thinking out loud, sorry. It would shut the journalists up about this, that's for sure. Would it harm the government? I don't know. Would it harm the strategy of the lockdown? Potentially, but maybe not. But the thing is, technically it is a big enough breach of the rules for somebody in his position to go. But the fact is that he hasn't yet. I feel like he's missed the prime opportunity to go. And generally how these things happen is if they can keep this pressure up on him, it'll be a few more days, maybe even a week, and then he'll finally go once the opportunity to go in a semi-dignified way pops up again. So now on to the things that are annoying me about it, and I think particularly as I've been looking at Twitter, which is both a lot of fun and also an incredibly toxic environment, so I'm really in two minds about Twitter all the time. But I think that this sort of constant nitpicking about this story, which in the grand scheme of things, in the very grand scheme of things, is a minor blip in history, I find it to be not necessarily surprising, but a little bit irritating and a bit grating at times. Especially because when it first broke out, all of these journalists with cameras were surrounding Dominic Cummings' house, which, as well as potentially being a breach of his privacy, they were not social distancing themselves. So they were getting outraged at Dominic Cummings breaking lockdown rules, but they themselves were breaking the lockdown rules, and they have not been held accountable for their actions. Presumably not even by their news corporations. They've just sort of allowed it, really, and that is hypocritical to an extent. Additionally, should this be put on his family? Probably not. You know, he said that he felt like his house had become a target. Whether you think he's just trying to victimise himself or whether he was genuinely concerned about it is another matter, but it's very, very easy to see why he would think that his house has become a target. This isn't justified, I don't think, and certainly not going to his relatives' houses is justified. I sort of shared this Facebook meetup thing to say, oh, let's go and visit Dominic Cummings' mum as a joke, but apparently some journalists have actually been doing that or considering going to, stand outside his relatives' houses and speak to them, which is just ridiculous, and it's an enormous breach of privacy as well. Now, there are a lot of people that say that Dominic Cummings has really created, or helped to create, this sort of culture of direct personal abuse of public figures. And that is very much true to an extent, because a lot of that toxicity came about during the EU referendum, and obviously he was one of the great campaign architects for the Leave campaign. However, does that necessarily mean it's okay for it to be done to him? No, because if we are attacking him for creating that culture, then we are at least a little bit hypocritical in going and allowing this culture of torrents of abuse being directed at people. I personally think it's too far. I think that him and people like him are responsible for allowing that in this society, but I don't think that means that we are all justified in going and giving him a taste of his own medicine, especially considering that he has other members of his family which have had really nothing to do with him in terms of his political career and what he's done in his career. Then there's the thing about certain journalists. I feel like the press are particularly, I'm going to say it, biased against him, for very good reason probably, but I suppose in the sort of same way that he is a bit of a Malcolm Tucker figure, the press, senior journalists, probably don't particularly like him very much, and so they're using this, they've really latched onto this and are sort of sending wave and wave and wave of scrutiny and attention to this guy for this thing that he's done. Now, I'm not saying he shouldn't face scrutiny, and I don't agree with this decision. However, what this is doing is distracting from other more important issues. So, for example, in the daily press briefings, a lot of the questions that have been asked by members of the public have been questions about certain aspects of the lockdown. When will we be able to do this again? When will we be able to do this again? Can I do this? Can I do that? But then as soon as the journalist questions come on, it's like Dominic Cummings, da, 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 da. They're trying to capture, their supposed aim is to act as a force to sort of question the government about things that are in the public mood, things that are in the public interest. And whilst I think that this is an issue that is the public interest, it's not the key issue that's in the public interest. The public themselves have proved this by asking questions that are not directly related to Dominic Cummings, with a few exceptions, but by and large, it's been other things. They've been concerned about other things. So the journalists are really kind of bypassing what people really want answers on by asking ministers questions about Dominic Cummings that they probably know full well, and we all know full well, will not get answered properly. So I feel like it's just a bit lazy and a bit out of touch with the public mood, really. There are key issues and concerns that are still issues and concerns, such as the lack of PPE, the fact that actually we seem to be doing quite badly in terms of our handling of this pandemic. Generally, other really key issues that the government need to be held accountable for, that the media are not holding them to account for because they're all focused on Dominic Cummings. There are so many issues that I think are so much more important that if the media put the amount of effort and time into those issues as they have done with this issue, which in my opinion is an issue, but it's relatively a lot smaller than a lot of the other issues, we would just be so much better off. I think there are so many outrageous things that have happened that the media have just sort of thrown under the bus a little bit. Like, they just sort of haven't really focused on them. For example, a lot of people saying, oh, during the whole Labour Party anti-Semitism thing, there was an equal problem with the Conservatives and Islamophobia, and the press was sort of quite silent on that. that's just one example. There are obviously issues from all sides of the political spectrum that people feel like the media ignores. And when they ignore these issues, you can't help but wonder if there is some sort of ideological bias that is driving the media to report some stories but not others. And I really feel like that this Dominic Cummings issue is one of those things. There are a lot of more important issues that the press needs to be pushing the government on and pushing them and holding them accountable for, but they're not. They're trying to spin the public mood. They're trying to spin this so that this is the one important story. And I feel like it really isn't the most important story, but they are trying their absolute best to try and be relentless about it so everybody pays attention, so everybody gets outraged about this, so they don't have to worry about holding the government to account when it comes to other things. And I feel like that is to an extent ideologically motivated. And even though I am left wing and have an agenda myself, I think it's important to call out people when I feel like they are presenting themselves as just reporting what's happening, but under the surface they have a bit of a bias. And I feel like a lot of the media are having this attitude right now, where a lot of reporters present things as fact, as this is what's happening, we're not putting our spin on this, but this Dominic Cummings issue is sort of getting at certain biases in the media. Maybe not even just ideological biases. Maybe it's just exposing that they are just sniffing where the money is, sniffing what they can make a big story out of. Because climate change is still a problem. The lack of PPE is still a problem. The Conservatives still have huge allegations of Islamophobia. There was that Labour Party document, which I, after many attempts, decided not to make a video about because I just couldn't find the words to do it. But those are questions that still need answering, and they're sort of being ignored because they think that they can spin this Dominic Cummings story and make more out of it and make more money out of it and pursue their own interests better with this story. And I just feel like that is not very good journalism. It's just not very good. I feel like this sort of collective hounding of this man, whilst justified to an extent, is a distraction. And that's how I see it, you know. I thought I'd be more attacking of Dominic Cummings in this video, but it seems as though I haven't been. But just to clarify my position, I think he probably should have resigned. And his actions were not really defendable, and I think that his press conference on Monday showed that actually some of his actions were ill thought out and a mistake, and he should be held accountable for that. And yeah, he probably should resign, but he hasn't. In my opinion, the fact that he hasn't is a stain on the government, and we just need to accept that stain on the government and move forward, potentially. And I know that it's a bit of an insult to a lot of people who have made tough sacrifices. Some people have missed funerals. Some people haven't been able to see their ill or dying loved ones. And this government advisor thinks it's okay for him to flout the rules because of his extraordinary circumstances. I'm not saying he doesn't need to be held accountable for that. What I'm saying is the way in which he's being held accountable is very toxic, and it's sort of uncovering, in my eyes anyway, a lot of what the press has the power to do but chooses not to do for most stories except this one. And that's why it does annoy me quite a bit. As far as allegations that he's not telling the full truth. Well, we'll have to wait and see with any more comes out. Another example of a big news story is the whole BA thing, which I've made posts about on Instagram, where essentially they're doing what Virgin did, is they have loads of money, but they're getting rid of their staff anyway, and re-employing certain others on 0 hours contracts, and, well, essentially 0 hours contracts. And that's not getting anything by the media. That's going to impact a lot of people's livelihoods. But no, they're focusing on Dominic Cummings instead. And also I feel like a lot of other government incompetence is being thrown under the radar because of this. And that's not good either. So again, to conclude, should Dominic Cummings go? I think he should have. Yes. Should he still go? Probably yes. But if he doesn't, should we keep putting all of this energy constantly into forcing him to go? Maybe not, because if we have the power to do this, if we have the power to use this energy, we should use it at things which are far more outrageous, I think. So, despite this big idiot's actions, fucking stay at home, right? Still abide by the lockdown rules, not out of a duty to the government. And I can't believe fucking Matt Hancock said this as well, and it makes me seem like I'm siding with more Tories, but I'm not. Ignore the fact that Matt Hancock said this as well, but do it for yourself, do it for your loved ones, you know. Don't think, oh, I can just go out and meet people because Dominic Cummings broke lockdown. Just do what you know to be right. There will be probably advice a bit further down the line about when we can start like properly seeing people again. Wait until that before you see people. Just still stay at home and maintain social distancing, because we'll have a pretty shitty rest of the year if we don't. So yeah, those are my thoughts. Do you think I was right? Do you think I was wrong? Let me know. And I might make another video about this. I just sort of had an urge to make a video about this because all of my Instagram stories weren't really getting my feelings across. So, yeah.